Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome an incredible next guest for you to listen to today, Rebecca Homkes, and I hope I've said that correctly because we did do a test run before we went live. And look, before we do this welcome here, I'm super interested to speak to you today because I think this is the only episode that we have ever had where we come at this discussion from an economic standpoint first and a digital business strategy second. And that's what I'm super excited to talk to you about today. So welcome to the podcast, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. Listen, what's super cool about you is you don't just have a lens on the world through this Europhile or Americo-centric lens on the world. You split your time between Miami and San Fran and the UK. You did your post-grad work, as I understand it, in the UK. And so the reality is you have a pretty global view on markets, how they operate, how they work, the language differences, the structural differences, right? And so I think that puts you in a pretty good pole position to maybe have a clearer crystal ball than most on what's coming down the economic pipeline that those of us in the business world then have to adapt to and deal with.
I try to. Yeah, I try to take a global view and also really nuance. It's a pretty messy data picture right now. So how do I nuance it, pull the nuggets that we actually need if we're trying to grow a business, and then decide what to do with that?
And you are on faculty as well. So this is not just, this is your life's work through every lens. So you're a strategic management consultant, but you also are a lecturer, London Business School, faculty at Duke. So you've made this your life's work from a study, an experience, from a teaching, and I guess a business and entrepreneurial perspective.
Yeah, my specialty is high growth strategy. So that's developing strategy, executing strategy, and innovating on strategy, which of course increasingly means bringing AI in. But my background is economics. My PhD is in that. That was one of the first things that I did. So it's trying to bring structure and methodology to topics that used to be seen as a bit fuzzy.
And how do you find that level of background, that really elevated, granular understanding of economic levers that sort of force businesses to do things that maybe they wouldn't otherwise choose to do, given all the options in the market? How do you find that serves you and your clients, particularly today when it feels like there is an element of uncertainty out there that we probably haven't seen in a long time economically? We have tariffs coming into picture now. I think even the economics, I listen to hundreds of podcasts and I try to keep my finger on the pulse of global economies all around the world because I've lived globally now. And it feels like there is a level of uncertainty out there that even by American standards is pretty elevated right now.
Yeah, and I'd agree. The challenge that I'm sure any leaders that you work with will say is, I had never run a company through a certain time. And I take that view. Running a company is fundamentally about executing through uncertainty. But what I'm hearing from CEOs pretty uniformly across the last couple of years is, even though we had tech uncertainty, kind of industrial uncertainty, we have this macro and policy uncertainty, which is converging with extreme technological uncertainty, which is converging with extreme consumer uncertainty. And all of that uncertainty together is muddling into what can feel like some almost a chaotic picture.
And the only thing that I can compare this to, and look, I've been in the business world for 25 years now, and the only other time that I can compare this to is at the very beginning of COVID. I was inside of an agency, running an agency, and literally in the span of about 2 weeks, every single client on our books paused all of the projects that they had in play with us. Now, every single one of them and more recommenced them about 2 months later when they could figure out, oh my God, this isn't the death of e-commerce. This is actually going to help. And we're going to see more business through our virtual doors than ever before because people have to stay home and they have to shop online more than ever before. And they have that digital gun to their head, so to speak. But man, the level of uncertainty, the companies that I was speaking to, and I was speaking to 2, 3, 4 a day for about a month, they were all going, we don't know what's next. And as a result of that, we have to conserve cash. We're not firing anybody yet. If this uncertainty continues, we will have no choice to. And we are likely to want to recommence these projects with you. But with this level of uncertainty, we need to have as much of a cash runway as we can have to deal with whatever outcome may come over the next few months. And so it feels like now this level of uncertainty today is much more protracted. It's not going to be 1 month, 2 months. And regardless of how you feel about Trump, positive or negative, there's a lot of people that feel really positively about him. And still, even the ones that feel very positive about Trump and the long-term benefits of what he's trying to do today, in the short term, even they say, geez, we're not quite sure what levers we can pull in our business right now to bring a level of calm to us and our team members. And it's causing a lot of anxiousness amongst employees going, I'm not sure if I'm going to have a job tomorrow when Amazon announces a 30,000 person layoff and they're one of the most successful companies in human history. They're one of the most profitable businesses in human history. And if they're laying off 30,000 people, well, surely I could be next.
Yeah, there's so much going on, but I think that the COVID example, Jason, is just such a good example of the uncertainty challenge, right? Is that if you notice something, whenever we speak to each other about uncertainty, we almost tend to put a word before the word uncertain. That means it's going to be bad, right? We ask each other, hey, how are you handling uncertainty or managing uncertainty or dealing with uncertainty? And in that framing, prefacing it with a negative word actually frames my brain, this is going to be bad. And if you go back to COVID, we weren't seeing a downturn or a recession. We were seeing extreme uncertainty. And companies almost uniformly acted like they were going into a downturn and went into what I call the survive playbook: cash, cost, customers, communication. And what we really saw in many industries, including many of your listeners, was actually one of the biggest booms that they had over that time. And so we have to reframe uncertainty and just define it. And I'm going to be an economist and define stuff for you. The definition of uncertainty is a series of future events which may or may not occur. Whether or not those events are good or bad depends on what we're trying to do and how we're set up. Our goal is to figure out what we want to do and then set up our organization or team to achieve success in that world. And if you reframe it from downturn coming to a series of growth opportunities, everything changes for your team.
Man, I couldn't. You've said that so succinctly and so well. And I've been a equities investor for a long time. I learned through multiple downturns and multiple contractions in multiple markets around the world that I was living in at the time that this too shall pass. And so now I am much more calm. It doesn't stress me out. In fact, I hope that Trump, every day, I hope that Trump will make some crazy tweet about tariffs where the market will dump 5%, where I can buy more at a cheaper price. And I think it's that reframing through the lens of experience that says tomorrow will come. And the reality is if the market all goes to zero, then we got bigger problems than where we're invested. And that if we have global thermonuclear war, then all bets are off. That's unlikely to happen. And so I think what I have learned, and I'd love your take on this as an economic specialist, is I can only control what I can control myself, which is my mindset, my heart set, my approach, my strategies. And if I can't control it, then I probably shouldn't be worried about it, because at the end of the day, that is taking up mental and emotional bandwidth that I need to focus on the things that are within my control. And is that kind of how you try to challenge your clients to think about the world?
Yeah, there's absolutely a framing and a scoping, but I think the most fundamental point is that uncertainty is a great time to grow. Now, it's not an easy time to grow. And actually, if you watch the news or CEO statements or economic statements, people are almost wishing for a downturn, right? That's why there's the old party joke. Economists have predicted 9 of the last 2 recessions. And the reason is simple, because it is easier to grow through a downturn. There is a playbook that works. It's not a sexy playbook. It's not a fun playbook, but you and I both know the playbook. You conserve cash, you reduce fixed cost, you cut down the team, you lean into your top customers. Again, we all have the same playbook. So we almost tend to want that to happen so we know what to do. Uncertainty is much more difficult, but actually a much better time to grow. And there's so many reasons for this, but one of the biggest reasons is that when uncertainty happens, the majority of the market falls into what I call 3 main traps, right? One, the classic entrepreneur trap is delusion, right? Where we say, hey, I'm great at uncertainty. I'm awesome in a downturn. My team thrives in a crisis, and we just plow ahead. Now, ironically, they're actually doing the worst because they made a plan at the beginning of the year and they're not adjusting, but they feel good about it, right? That's delusion. The second is paralysis, where you hear a leader say, let's just wait. Let's wait till the end of the summer after the tariff pause. Let's wait till after November 5th when the Supreme Court meets. And we keep punting and punting for this supposed element of certainty before we can make a decision. Now, Jason, why that's troubling is that you are delaying decisions. But what most teams don't realize that growth and performance is a muscle. If you put your team into this constant holding pattern, you're actually losing that muscle. Just like stopping to go to the gym for 6 months, if you show up to the gym after that and try to have a great workout, it's going to be an awful workout. So paralysis is damaging. And the third is what I call frenzy. And we see this a lot in the ecom digital space where people just throw stuff at the market hoping that something sticks. So if you think about delusion, paralysis, and frenzy, what I tell leaders, if you can avoid those three traps, you're one step ahead, right? But the biggest reason why uncertainty is a great time to grow is it's a great time to learn. What we underappreciate about uncertainty is that when uncertainty is high, so is honesty. Consumers and customers, also partners, vendors, suppliers, and employees are much more honest about what they really cherish, what they really need, and what they don't. And the learning loops that we have in periods of uncertainty are so much tighter and clearer. It is in some ways the most exciting time to grow a company or a product or solution because the learning prices are so much higher.
And how do you help your clients or students, obviously in the university world, how do you help them, this term reframing, I think it's come into the modern zeitgeist over the last couple of years, but even before I'd heard the word reframing, I recognized for example, I love public speaking. I love it.
Yeah.
I've always loved it. I've never been formally trained in it, but I love it. I get up on stage and it's as natural to me as breathing. It's partly because on personality tests, I'm like 98% extrovert. So for me, I get energy from those types of environments as opposed to feeling drained from those types of environments. But I know that, for example, some people that I've been on stage with or been in roundtables, or I've been in certain situations where I can see the fear in their eyes. They look like they're going to die. I can see the sweat on their brow. I can see them rubbing their hands together. I can see them fidgeting in their seat before we go live. I know, but what's funny about that is we have very similar physiological reactions to those situations. But for me, I interpret that physiological response as excitement. They interpret that physiological response, which may be almost identical to mine, as fear. And as a result of that, one enables and empowers and one paralyzes. And so how do you get these business people who are going through, you could have two companies going through operating in a similar vertical, similar market, similar size, facing similar challenges, but why does one business oftentimes see the biggest challenges as the biggest opportunities, and the other, what causes the second one to pull in their horns and act like a deer in the headlights? What do you see from a corporate level that creates those two different responses to the exact same stimuli?
Yeah, so there's, for lack of a better word, and not to alienate people, an intellectual reason, and then there's also a very organizational reason. Intellectually, it is because evolutionary biology, right? Our brains are trained to see uncertain things or the unknown as bad, right? And then our system goes into that. Now, for you, you've done public speaking, I'm sure, since you were a kid. I'm sure you were the one who didn't even raise his hand. You were straight to the front of the room, right? So for you,
I got in trouble for it, actually.
And when we should recognize, reward that more. We wonder why people aren't great public speakers as adults, because we train them to raise their hand and wait to be spoken to as children. But for you, that is a known environment, not an unknown environment. So your brain is trained to see that as excitement because that is your comfort zone. For those where that is unknown, your brain is trained to see this as scary or bad or something risky is going to happen. And that same translates into an organization. The organizational reason is much more practical and frankly, much more frustrating, is that the majority of organizations that have boards or board of governors, and nothing against boards, I'm on boards are great, needed, blah, 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 caveat, is that boards see their main role as governance. And no board wants to be on the board when something happened to the company that hit its stabilization. So boards tend to over-index into what I call survive mode, those basics that you have to restabilize after a system shock, rather than growth mode. And if your board has controlling of the company and one or two members of your C-suite, like your CFO or COO, has that mindset as well, organizationally, we are holding organizations back from taking the growth opportunities they have. So that's why the intellectual reframing is critical. And then making sure you've got organizational setup in place that you can take advantage of these growth opportunities. And so I named these phases, Jason, survive, reset, thrive, to help people paint more of a visual picture of where they are. Now, when there's a system shock, like a COVID, like a tariff that hits your retail industry, like a surprise election, right, where new regulations are coming in, we are going to go into survive mode. Survive mode is not recession proofing. I don't like to even use the R word. Survive mode is stabilize. I almost think about putting your shoulders back and sitting tall and saying, hey, I just got punched by the market. I can take the punch, right? You go through your basics, cash, cost, customers, communication, but you can't get stuck there. That is not a strategy. I try to say very clearly, very bluntly, survive mode, the 4 C's I call them, cash, cost, customer, communication, are not strategy. We all have the same playbook. If you keep doing those, you are going to stay stuck in survive mode. So practically what I suggest teams do is assign one person on your team and one board member to own survive. They keep care of that tracker. They give an update at either the weekly huddles or the quarterly board meeting. And that frees the mindset because mind share is so critical in growth as that frees the rest of the team to go into this growth mindset. But I found if you don't explicitly assign it to a member of the team and split the responsibility, the whole team will stay stuck there.
And how important do you
Yeah.
feel that it is when you are, let's say you're a company leadership team
Yeah.
or you're a chairman of a board and you're trying to appoint and identify new board members that would make a good fit for this particular business, et cetera, or you hire an outside selection team to help you select a board in a more impartial way. What I find is that boards over-index for skills and experience, but not personality and psychology. Now,
Yeah.
to me, that feels like a missed opportunity because everybody, just like me, interpreting those sweats as
Yeah.
excitement versus an opportunity versus fear, board members have their own personality types. So
Right.
some are more generally more risk averse and some are more risk embracing. It's
Yeah.
just the way that they're hard
That's it.
wired. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a male or female trait, but it sometimes is. And so I think that boards, instead of just looking through the lenses of a diversity of background, ethnicity, gender, skills, and experience, we actually should also be looking through the lenses of personality
Yeah.
and default psychology. And I feel that by doing that, we don't get caught in this trap where everybody on the board is so risk averse that we become paralyzed in an uncertain environment. But I love your idea of assigning that to someone so we free up the
Yeah.
mental and emotional bandwidth
Yeah.
of the rest of the team to not have to think about that 24/7. But how important do you think it is to have very diverse boards, especially in times of uncertainty?
Diverse boards and diverse teams, right?
Yes.
Is that because the boards have different roles in different types of organizations, but it's that diversity. For instance, if I ask you, what are the 3 greatest uncertainties facing your industry right now? More than 80% of people tell me the 3 greatest risks they're facing right. And so if you ask potential board members, what are the 3 biggest trends facing our industry right now? If you pick every board member who gave you 3 risks when you asked that question, again, I didn't ask for risk. I asked for uncertainty. And these are the little questions you can tease out to see if we have a growth mindset. If I ask you, do you have a growth mindset? You're going to say yes, right? Because we all believe that we do. But I try to tease it out with these different questions to see where that inner framing is.
And we can't have this conversation
Yeah.
without the question of AI. And I
Yeah.
think what's really interesting about
We
this,
just hit a world record of not getting to it for the first however many minutes we've been
exactly,
speaking.
we're almost 20 minutes in, and I don't think we've dropped the AI bomb yet.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is I think I think I'm very realistic about AI. I see the opportunity because I've seen these transformational changes hit my industry in particular multiple times before, from mobile to everything to do with e-commerce becoming, it went from what felt like in the beginning might be a fad, it became a trend, and then it became literally an operational part of our lives to where it
Yeah.
was so normalized that if you didn't shop via e-commerce at least occasionally, you would be considered strange by societal standards. And then, of course, when this thing became the remote control of our lives, it took over absolutely everything else. And so uh, I've seen this kind of disruption. It could be taken positively or negatively, but I've seen this level of disruption before. And so I guess my pattern recognition sensors go off and go, this is just another major transformational event to hit in our industry. But I've seen this before, something similar to this before. Now it will be, some are saying it's the fourth industrial revolution, will be the most transformative technology ever to hit. And that may be true ultimately, but I've just found that usually these types of transformational events they don't happen as quite as fast as we first assume they will. So what I mean by that is we tend to have a little bit more time up our sleeve to adjust, adapt, and thrive than we think we do in the beginning when it's all fresh and it's all new and it's all scary. And so is that something that you, even with regards to AI or anything
Yeah.
else, feels
Yeah.
very disruptive? Perhaps maybe the most disruptive thing we've ever seen in our life, because if you're just coming into the business environment sometime in the last 3 years and you haven't seen what I've seen over 25 years, you would potentially interpret this disruption as a big negative, right? You wouldn't necessarily see the positive upside because you haven't seen the positive upside of disruption before. So how do you help, especially younger leaders and younger entrepreneurs, navigate the level of disruption that they may have never encountered before?
So AI is an opportunity. It's also a challenge, right? As you just alluded to, there are very sophisticated CEOs of companies, the name of that even a year and a half or 2 years ago were saying, I don't want to jump on a fad. I don't want this to, there were people were afraid it would be the next blockchain or the next AR, VR that we were promised would be something that didn't take on. I'm not having those conversations anymore. Now I'm having the conversations of, I think I'm behind. What do I do? The adoption curve of executives and boards, I went from boards of the publicly traded companies in the US, barely mentioning it, to wanting to get an update every quarter. So there has been a seismic shift in the last kind of 12 to 18 months, at least in kind of the US European kind of corporate context. The challenge of AI goes back into the necessity of a reset, right? When we have events like COVID or Russia-Ukraine war or things like that, we know our existing strategy and plan is probably no longer relevant. We have a forcing mechanism that tells us you need to pause and you need to reset. When you have something like AI, which causes a much more fundamental reset of your growth strategy, because it doesn't feel like a forcing mechanism, it's still in most organizations being held on the side. It's being held within the data team, within the tech team, and for those who have it in the e-commerce team. And that is the big miss that's happening right now. Frankly, I don't like to tell people where they are in like the Gantt table, but everyone wants to know where they compare. But I, without really joking, say, do you have an AI strategy? And who owns it? And if you A, have an AI strategy, and B, the tech team owns it, you're probably behind. And you're probably behind big time because the companies that are leading don't have an AI strategy. They understand that AI's role is to enable, support, and accelerate the value creating strategy of the organization. So if you want to take this seriously, what I suggest every C-suite team does, you need to pause right now and reset your strategy, whether it's a month old or 2.5 years old, to say, okay, what is AI's role in enabling, supporting, and accelerating our value creation strategy? And on the risk side, if you, strategy 101 for 2 seconds, if you think value creation is defined as driving the biggest gap possible between customer willingness to pay and total cost, two needles, move customer willing to pay up, move total cost down. The majority of companies are focusing on the needle down. Cost savings, productivity savings, time savings. Great. However, those savings are essentially finite. Once you move that needle down, it's down. The massive opportunity is needle up, opening new markets, launching new solutions, reaching new customers or consumers. And that's where there's not the same level of sophistication happening, I think in part because of where the AI quote unquote strategy is being held inside organizations. So punchline, it's a pause and reset time now. The challenge is it's going to feel like it doesn't need to be, right? Because you're going to think the change is so slow, but you've got to start building that capability now.
And I'm going to describe to you two scenarios
Okay.
where I've discussed AI with very large companies within the
Yeah.
last 3 months. I was at a private AI symposium hosted by Google in Chicago last month, and there was a whole bunch of manufacturers and distributors there. A gentleman in the back of the room who I didn't even know what company he was from. He stood up and we had a panel up there, some panel not only from Google, but some other companies who were helping with AI transformation. And so there was a panel. We opened it up the floor to questions. Gentleman in the back stood up and he said, "Oh, I work for a manufacturing company that's based here in Chicago. We're a multi-billion-dollar a year company. We're doing very well. We're very successful, but we want to make sure that we missed out on the mobile revolution. We don't want the AI revolution to pass us by. So we're going to market right now. We're trying to find AI partners to come in and run proofs of concept with us around certain AI technologies that we might be able to adopt. But every single proposal we're getting is like 6 months minimum and like millions of dollars minimum for a proof of concept." And he goes, "We just can't stomach that kind of money for effectively just a basic test. to see whether this is going to be beneficial to our business or not. And we all gasped because we're all, and even the woman who was representative of Google said, we would never propose a proof of concept that was in the millions of dollars, because we think that using our AI, we can have a proof of concept that's delivered in literally a couple of months, and it costs a fraction of that. And we can very quickly, we're so confident in our ability to provide value and prove value that we're not talking badly about the people you're talking to, but we can tell you from our personal experience of running these types of POCs before, that is far too long to get a result, and that is far too expensive to get a result. That's the first discussion we had. The second discussion we had, I was a B2B e-commerce world in Australia a couple of months ago, and we had a company, a massive global distributor in their vertical, who came up on stage. The CEO and the head of digital transformation were speaking together, and they were talking about how much AI they had adopted into the business and how transformational it had been over the prior 12 months. The challenge that they had seen, despite the fact that they had a board level mandate and a CEO level mandate to adopt AI everywhere in the business where it made sense to do so, and it would be funded to do so. What they still struggled with, they said, look, we're a Microsoft shop. So we get Copilot with all of our technology, we get Copilot built in. Now, some of our team want to use ChatGPT, some of our team want to use Gemini, some of our team want to use Grok. And what we're struggling with is not so much AI curiosity, because we got plenty of that. How do we bring in a reasonable governance framework into our business so that AI doesn't just turn into another form of shadow IT in our business that we have no idea where it is and what it's doing?
Shadow IT is a big deal, right? So I'd say from both of those, again, hopefully people at the conference found an amazing sales opportunity in the back row, because I think a lot of people would say, I don't know who you're talking to. But I have seen this as well, right? Is AI companies will assume that the customer is an AI non-native and they can basically sell anything and charge anything. And that's just not the case right now. So what I say is when you think about AI and strategy, because there's no such thing as AI strategy, there's 4 planks. Here's the 4 planks. The first is your data and tech foundation. This is actually the biggest stumbling block to truly creating value with AI, and this is very much an issue in the e-commerce world. Our different business units, our divisions, our data is trapped, it is unstructured, it is not clean, it doesn't talk to each other. We believe we're sitting on this gold mine. We're probably not, as an aside, but we believe we're sitting on this data gold mine. Our tech infrastructure is made by a bunch of legacy systems. Our tech data is out the wall. So there's a tech data issue. The second is the governance. Governance is actually really critical to growth because boundaries give people freedom. And entrepreneurs sometimes underappreciate this, is that in large organizations, you do need governance in place from very early days, because people know, I work for a corporation. I know there's rules. And if I don't know what those rules are, I won't try anything because I don't want to get in trouble, especially in the macro environment we're in. So there's a governance RAI aspect. Then there's a capability building. Do our folks actually know how to use these tools in a way that's productive? And then the fourth is linking AI to value creation. And the challenge, Jason, is that most C-suites or most boards over-index into one of these planks, and they believe this is a sequential world. First, I build tech and data, then I build capability, then I build governance, then I do value creation. Others say, no, I just got to get some wins, and then I'll work on this. And it's a parallel pathing world. Like, that is the secret to doing well. You need to take each of these planks and be simultaneously parallel pathing them. But parallel pathing, as you know from your former life, is very uncomfortable, right? Because you are running 4 paths simultaneously that feels like they need the other inputs in. And that is what's holding companies back. The second is, and my colleagues take different points of view on this, I'll share my bias. I do think there is a need to let people get some quick wins. As much as I'm going to hammer home about value creation all day, we need to see quick wins and momentum. But that needs to be done in a methodology or a framework. When we let people or organizations do AI by every team deciding how to be more productive, you end up with 1,000 science projects and no value creation. And you are probably overfunding actually lack of productivity, because one team's efficiency is another team's lack of productivity while they try to decipher the AI inputs that are coming in. Some colleagues have labeled this work slop. So all 4 planks and being super focused on the AI integration are those that enable, support, and accelerate value creation, not just personal productivity. You got to quite soon move from personal productivity to process reinvention.
And what happens when you encounter, because I was working with an SI recently who I helped them with their capability development around B2B e-commerce, because most agencies are so B2C and D2C focused that they can't execute on the massive B2B opportunity because they just don't have that skill set. And one of the challenges we ran into inside that business straight away was that they are a Microsoft shop. And so the company, the parent company had sent an edict to so there's a holding company and then there's Portcos. The Portco was the one I was working with. The Holdco had an edict that came down from the top across all their Portcos that said, we are a Microsoft shop. You can only use Copilot. That is it. Now, what they were finding is that especially in the web development space, Claude Code and ChatGPT and many other platforms are vastly better than Copilot for their specific use case, but they were forbidden from using it. Now, what we were finding was when in discussion with the developers is they were bringing their own devices. They were installing ChatGPT on their own devices. They were using Grok on their own devices. They were using Gemini on their own devices. And then they were emailing themselves answers and snippets of code and everything else because they couldn't use it. They couldn't use it on their own network. It was banned. And so I'm going to myself, how does the person at the very top of this company know that Copilot is going to be the best for every single portfolio company to use inside their business to make them more efficient, better? Because the customer is demanding that we get more efficient because they're using AI every day themselves. And they're going, I'm using AI every day to become more efficient. Aren't you? Because you're still charging me legacy rates based on not having a Claude Code, for example, to help you code. Why aren't you using Claude Code? We were starting to get direct questions like that from clients saying, what are the coding Copilot technologies that you use in your business to make yourself more efficient? Now, that put us all in a very awkward position, and they had to get a special dispensation from the parent company to use different AI technology than the rest of the portfolio companies. Do you see this this feels like such a real world problem?
Yes, it is a real world problem. And I know it sounds like we're in the weeds to some, but this is lack of strategic insight. It's also lack of strategic understanding, right? Preventing folks from using tools they use in their personal life that are more productive does not prevent them from using it. It prevents them from using them within the risk guidelines that you want in your company. A question that I get is, should I really get everyone in the company a Copilot license because it's X amount of money? That's the wrong question. The right question is, how should I enable either build custom GPTs if I really want to invest? That is the best way to do it. If you want to, my thing is, if you want to pick a partner, but then really invest and develop your own custom GPTs with them so folks have the whole remit, whether it's chat or insights, etc. If you're not going to make that development, why are you picking a winner? I encourage all companies to be brand agnostic within their extreme risk guidelines. Is some folks probably need 4 licenses and some need none, is the better way to look at it from a strategic point of view, which goes down to what problem are we trying to solve? I'm trying to solve the problem of value creation. And I've identified that I can 3x my programming team in my e-commerce site. Then I need to just enable the tools I have there. Identify value creation, friction, and opportunities. Then the opportunities, we can solve them with AI, and then the tools. But the tools are the very end of that decision-making framework, not the beginning.
And sometimes what I've seen, and I'd love your take on this, so in this particular scenario, the way we got the special dispensation is we could say the team's already using some of these other third-party tools anyway, and they're paying for them themselves because it's making them more productive. Here's 5 tangible examples where these alternate platforms solved the problem for us that Copilot couldn't. And so by giving these real tangible, very cut and dried examples to leadership, we could say, does this justify us being able to use this tooling on a day-to-day basis? And can you buy the licenses and let us use it on our company issued laptops, for example? And that's what got that through was maybe you could call that sort of a little bit of subterfuge. You could call it, I don't know what to call it. Sometimes it takes someone stepping a little bit outside that corporate box, getting some quick wins and being able to demonstrate those quick wins to leadership and say, look, I did this on my own time. I did this research on my own time. I did this practice work on my own time. I think this would really help us and really benefit us. Can we at least try it for 6 months?
And we saw the same in the old PC versus Mac, what device you could bring to work. We saw this in kind of the mobile. And we're seeing it again. I'll say again, the lens is value creation, then the opportunities, and then the tools. You don't start the decision-making framework with the tools. The tools are just that, a tool to achieve a dramatic value creation gain. I am agnostic to the tool, right, as soon as I identify what that value creation gain is.
And how do you create an environment within, because presumably some of the organizations you work with are very large. And
Yes.
I ran a free mentorship program for a number of years, and I worked with a lot of people early in their career trying to figure out what path do I go down, etc. And I said, look, there's two things you really want to look for above all else that you at least understand before you take a new role. One, is this an earn or learn role, or is it both? And
Yeah.
two, you're not going to be managed by a company, you're going to be managed by a boss. And so the reality is, if you don't understand who your boss is going to
Yeah.
be and whether you think genuinely they're going to be a good or a bad boss, right? It's all fine and good to say, "Oh, I'm going to go work for Microsoft," but if you don't get along with your boss, you're first of all, you're probably not going to be there very long, and second of all, it's probably not going to be that fulfilling, or you're probably not going to be that productive, and
Right.
you may end up getting fired anyway. So the
Yeah.
reality is, it's just as important. It's more important for you to pick a boss than a company to work for. And so I think this holds true for kind of everything across an organization. It is our
Mhm.
job as leaders to create a safe, productive environment to
Mhm.
get the best out of the individuals within it. And that is to where I feel like as leaders, it is our responsibility to wear the uncertainty
Mhm.
more than
Yeah.
passing that uncertainty down the value chain in the business.
Mhm.
It's a little bit, we got to protect the team
Yeah.
from that uncertainty to a degree so that they're not paranoid, so they don't live in a state of paranoia, a heightened state of cortisol, a
Mhm.
low state of energy, and so that they've got one foot out the door, whether we realize it or not. I feel like that's the danger zone that a lot of companies are getting into, not just with AI, but anything that is disruptive to their business, positive or negative.
Look, we're in a period of heightened uncertainty, as we've been speaking about. And if you're touching the consumer, you're very worried about the macro consumer and where he or she is going, especially into a critical holiday period. If you're touching the B2B space, you're very concerned about the corporate layoffs that you're seeing. If you're in a mixed space, I could go on, right? Now, the challenge is leadership training hasn't fundamentally changed and it needs to, right? Leaders are traditionally trained to have the answers. And that's actually flawed right now because you don't know the answer because things are happening. A great leader now says, I don't know like the answer to this, but here's the questions I'm asking, or here's the questions that I'm asking you. It's little things, Jason, like in the weekly huddle. It's not about what did you do last week? What do you need to do this week? I add two. What did I learn last week? What do I need to learn this week? It's fundamentally moving from wanting a team. I'll give you a simple example. We tend to start review meetings with the question, are we on track to plan? It's a comforting question. We want to be on track to plan. It is the wrong question to start a review meeting with because that question assumes there was only one track, like we got it right the first time and the situation hasn't changed. I don't take that assumption in any market right now. So a great leader starts the meeting with, has the situation changed? I have now empowered the team to share changes in the situation. Now, the situation hasn't changed. Let's go back to the plan and look at that. But there's these subtle shifts as well as these macro shifts we need to make from having the answers to having the question, from asking, are we on track to plan to has the situation changed? One of the things I tell leaders that you can do to really piss me off, which you don't want to do, is if I call you and we're chatting and I say, "Hey, how's it going?" And you say, "Things are great. I'm in heads down execution mode." What the hell are you doing there? That's the worst place to be right now. You need to be in heads up learning mode. This is really important. Now, the other trap though, Jason, is leaders will think, they'll tell me, and I'm sure they tell you, my team's great in a crisis. Big downturn crisis, my team is awesome. We come together. And a common question I get is, how can my team act like in crisis mode more? The crisis mode is really great for adrenaline, but very temporary. And this kind of burns teams out. We have to build a capability of handling uncertainty by, again, the reframing that we've been speaking about. I don't need to shield you from it as a leader, but I do need to reframe. So you are getting even better than me at spotting the growth opportunities in them because you're probably closer to the market than I am. And I call them the kickers and killers. We need to stop asking what could happen because I can't predict, you can't predict, and instead ask what could make us or what could break us and train the team to look for these kickers and killers. I'll tell you, we are much better identifying killers. If I sit a team down and say, give me 10 kickers and 10 killers, they'll give me 10 killers in less than 5 minutes. They will need an hour without a Gen AI tool to give me 10 kickers because our brain is just not framed to think that way. So, long answer, but practically, these little shifts in the questions you're asking and how you're handling make a massive difference. Because if you can get a team to thrive through uncertainty, that's what we're trying to do. And we cannot predict the future. We just can't. Now, AI is making us think we can, but we still cannot predict the future. The sweet spot, the key capability is, are you good at making great decisions, even though you can't make great predictions? That's the capability you want to build with your team.
That is such a key point. I get clients sometimes asking me, what makes you a better consultant? What makes you better at what you do than these other three people we're considering, or whatever it might be? And I almost always respond with, I think the questions I ask, not the answers I give, but the questions I ask are better than most other people I've encountered in my industry. And therefore, my discovery is better. Therefore, my understanding of your business is better. My understanding of your pain points and opportunities is better. Therefore, we ultimately get a better result because I'm asking smarter, more nuanced, deeper questions of the entire business. And I had a boss a number of years ago, and he famously used to tell me all the time, with a man by the questions he asketh, not the answers he giveth. And I was like, man, I love that, because really, you just said it. If you can ask better questions of your team, of yourself, of the leadership, then you will probably come up with better answers and results on the back of that. And so I feel like leadership to be confident enough to paint a really positive, clear vision of the future, but humble enough to know they don't have all the answers, and to focus a lot more time on asking better questions.
There's a great humbleness in this. And again, uncertainty is a great time to grow because it's a great time to learn. But learning comes to leaning into these learning loops that we have in the market right now. And we have to separate the headlines from the storyline, right? I can look at the headlines. Let's just take the American economy right now, and it's all green, right? Stock market is up, GDP is up, consumer spending is not great, but not terrible. The storyline is so much more nuanced. And the winners of those who win this holiday season, because I know it's top of mind, but also next year, are those who have a really differentiated growth strategy going into a very nuanced data picture. And so this is a real skill set. You cannot take the headline as the story. We need to be better and better about asking the questions and digging, because that's going to determine how you're going to grow through this market.
And do you see either people that you've worked with or people that you've witnessed working in the market, do you, like, if you were to pick 2, 3, 4 leaders that most people would have heard of or may have heard of, at least in their verticals, do you see any out there that are really living this mindset, this heart set, this view of the world, this curious but positive approach to doing business, that they have more of an infinite game mindset to business than short-term wins and losses, and that's the scoreboard and that's it? Who do you see out there in the industry right now who you feel is creating an environment for their team members to thrive?
Look, I think it's always challenging, because in any big company I name, there's going to be folks who work there who think that's not really how it is. But I'll use a macro example, because Walmart is a fun one to watch right now, right? I really clocked it, is that we've had tech executives telling in annual reports and news cycles how much AI was going to change their business model. And the average market kind of didn't really pay attention. When Walmart's CEO came out in the Wall Street Journal about a couple months ago and said, we're reimagining everything we do because of AI, and we're going to keep our workforce flat, even as we grow over the next few years. And oh, by the way, if you didn't see the news, they're now integrating directly into ChatGPT. Now, Walmart's CEO is infamous for giving speeches about them being a little farther than they might be at that time. So again, to my caveat to the folks on the call who work for Walmart. But this is someone who's really leaning in, and as a non-tech executive and the people around him and all the folks running their e-com, their omni, et cetera, saying, we get it. Our consumer is on ChatGPT. They are asking rather than searching, and we need to be there for them when they want to do that, right? And look, Airbnb is very famous for kind of a learning mindset, really rethinking the jobs to be done and making good decisions based on beliefs, right? Not trying to predict the future, but saying, hey, here's a couple of beliefs we have about the market right now. Here's how we're going to shift or adjust for it. But I also love examples. The former CEO of Brooks, the running company, they are also excellent at this learning mindset. They went from being a no-name shoe brand if you didn't run marathons for fun, which I appreciate not very many people do, to blowing past all the big folks during 2020 because they learned faster. They sent local runners out to all the local parks with a clicker and just clocked runners every day between 4 and 5 p.m. during those first couple of months of COVID, and used those little things to go into their planning. So they didn't have the supply chain shocks others did, because they were leaning into this so much. So those are just a couple of examples people might know. I could give dozens more, but you're looking for this growth mindset without the nonsense that we usually have around it. Again, you can't ask someone if they have it, they'll say yes. You need to look at what questions do they ask their team? How do they run their meetings? Do they tell me their beliefs before they tell me their choices? That's what I really look for. Right. The choices you make only matter to me if they're prefaced by your strategic beliefs, because then I know what you're testing and what you're learning as you're executing your priorities.
Really interesting that you said the head of Walmart is not a
Yeah.
tech executive. My question for you is, can you be the leader of a
Yeah.
modern company and not be a tech executive today?
So, look, the cliche conference stick that a lot of keynotes were doing a couple years ago is you've probably been in these conferences. I'd say, hey, everyone stand up if you're in the insurance industry. Okay, keep standing up if you're in the technology industry. When everyone sits down, you make fun of the people who's cut down. I don't do those sticks, right? Is dropping the word I am bank and now I'm just right, Spur Bank. I'm now going to be Spur. That's nonsense, Jason. That doesn't mean anything, right? Yes, most companies are funneled by a strong technological backbone. I think it is very difficult to be a successful CEO without being a digital native, or at least be very willing to learn and or surround yourself with team members who are, right?
Mhm.
You don't need to be coding on Claude AI before work every morning to be a great CEO, but you need to be able to have conversations with folks on your team who are, so you can help them make the right decisions about which corporate partners to sign up to, what licenses to get. So I care more, are you leaning in? Are you really going up the learning curve? And are you surrounding yourself with folks who are going to help you do that? Or are you surrounding yourselves with people who have the same view that you do? That's much more important than the brand that you might put around yourself.
Yeah, and look, I think just
Yeah.
we didn't all come out of the birth canal knowing how to drive a car, but we all figured it out. I'm 50 years old, and I feel like from a tech
Yeah.
perspective, I'm far more advanced than people half my age, or my
Yeah.
wife's a fair bit younger than me, and I
Yeah.
feel like I'm technically more advanced. So I think we can all learn new
Oh,
things
yeah.
if we want to.
If we want to.
If we put the
Yeah.
effort into it and we see the value behind that learning.
Mhm.
I'm an autodidactic learner. I never went to university. I never got a degree. I've always been a self learner my whole life, but I've always just gotten right into the nitty gritty of whatever it was I wanted to learn. And I've dug deep in it. I'm living in Lovable every day right now,
Yeah.
writing
Yeah.
applications. I'm a non-developer, but I'm a very technical non-developer, so I can write apps now in these vibe
Isn't it
coding
great? Yeah.
platforms,
Love
and
livable.
it is just epic. And if I had a different mindset, and because I know some of my peers,
Yeah.
they go, I don't know that stuff. They go, I don't know. I don't even know where to start with that stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I didn't either until I just
Just got
started.
to start.
It's till I signed up, got a Lovable subscription, got a
Yeah.
Superbase subscription, got an OpenAI subscription, and we went to town and we started playing. And we started
Yes.
learning and we started adapting. We started adjusting. That is the entire history of humanity, is learning
Just
and
learn.
developing and doing new things. That creating tools was what differentiated us from the rest of the animals. And so I like to think that really there is no barrier to learning regardless of age. Would you believe that's genuinely true?
Absolutely. Like, I'll go one farther. I'm going to share 4 words with you, and it's the simplest, most powerful differentiator of organizations. Learn faster, grow faster. It is the number 1 differentiator of high performance firms across all of the variables. Number 2 is not even close. Organizations that learn faster are organizations that grow faster. Now, the challenge is every organization will tell you they're a learning organization, and then they'll tell you why, because they have book clubs or they have an LMS or they go to a university. And the pushback is, no, that makes you a teaching organization. A learning organization happens in the field, in the market, with their customers, with their employees, with the tool, right? So that's what I look for as an individual leader, as an organization. Are you better and better at going up these very steep learning curve? The challenge with AI is you can play with the tools, get some personal productivity, and think you're done. And
Yeah.
you've got to go over that hump and actually go again to process reinvention, to launching new, to focusing on that needle up. And that comes from the metrics. No, I do not like measuring save time, right? Save time does not matter to me. It shouldn't matter to any shareholder. I care about repurpose time. So you got 10 hours back from your coding team. How did you repurpose that? So your sales team got 20 hours back a week. How did you repurpose that? I want boards tracking repurpose time, not save time. Repurposed revenue, not saved cost, right? These are the key things which go into that learning mindset. Am I not just learning how to use the tool? I am learning how to create an order of magnitude more value because of what this tool enabled me to do.
Yeah, and look, it's so interesting that
Yeah.
that contextualize it exactly that
Yeah.
way, because when I'm working with
Yeah.
B2B orgs, manufacturers and distributors, of the companies that track sales reps' time by activity,
Yeah.
not all do. Some of them just simply divide total hours worked by total revenue generated, and that's where it stops.
Yeah.
But the ones that have a CRM that track, okay, sales rep A drove from us to the site. They were on site for an hour with the customer, and then they came back and they keyed in an order into the ERP or whatever it is. When they track by activity, what we have found is that somewhere between 20 and 60% of tracked time is unproductive in the sense that it adds no value to them. It's not putting any more commission in their pocket, and it adds no value to the customer, or at least it's not a value the customer recognizes as a value. Now, that's a serious friggin' problem. And if we can bring AI in and we can take those former communication channels, the emails, the WhatsApp, the Slack, the Teams, etc., which they're oftentimes communicating with their customers through, and we can turn those into headless commerce channels, and we can receive POs through those channels. We receive quote requests. We can transform them electronically, get them into our commerce systems automatically with no human intervention. Like that, all of a sudden, now I ask the same question as you. We can do that today. There's technology that will allow us to do that. But what would that do for your organization? What would that do for your sales team? What would they do instead of useless things they're doing today that's just churning the wheel, that's just getting orders into an ERP so that you can fulfill them? If you could free up that time, would you knock on more doors? Would you go to more trade shows? Would you be more active in the community? Would you produce more content? What would you do to drive additional business for the business if you weren't doing all this stuff that we can replace with technology? And that, I think that's
part of what you're complaining about anyway. They're complaining about all this stuff anyway. Look, I had this conversation earlier this morning. It's the scarcity mindset.
Yes.
If I save time, generically, I am concerned that I will get less resources. I will get 1 or 2 less sales rep on my team. I will get X. So what incentive do I have as an employee to save time or become more efficient? I get this in professional services. Professional services are pushing back big time. Engineering companies are saying, Rebecca, we charge by the hour. We have no incentive to get more efficient. But your customers are using AI tools and they're going to demand that you get more efficient. So do you want to get there after they fire you, or do you want to get there ahead? This reframing we spoke about uncertainty, we have to get on the power of these tools. Again, is not about savings. It's about repurposing. And that's, again, what are the skill sets that I'm looking for in future employees if I'm hiring? That mindset. Am I obsessed with repurposing time from tools, or am I scared of saving time because I'm concerned about what the resource consequences might be?
Yeah, I guess it goes back to that saying, you're probably not going to be replaced by another human, but you'll probably be replaced by another human using AI, and who's AI augmented, right? Who is someone who's more efficient than you. If I'm going to market and I'm asking the question, and like I said, some of the SIs I'm working with, they're literally getting the question from their customers, what AI tooling are you using?
I love, because I'm asking this question. I'm getting very few saying that they're asking about it, but it's so exciting, right? Because I can actually build an agentic workforce in my supply chain system that understands my overstock and my understock. That agent communicates with my agents in trade promotion, who can understand where we need to be running promotions and where we're pulling back, which can communicate with my agents in marketing. And I still have my great folks in those teams, but they're not sitting on email or Teams or Slack all day trying to get this information. It's happening almost simultaneously. And then look at all that value that we're creating. So I am super excited about what we can do. But again, the majority of organizations are still trapped in getting personal productivity or maybe team productivity, and it's not translating value creation gains. And the trap of that is, if executive level does not see gains, they're going to think they're funding nonsense. And we could actually see money pulled back from AI in a typical company because we're using it too much for these personal productivity gains across organizations.
And so would you say that organizations need to have at least a 50-50 view of where should their bias be? Should their bias be towards what initiatives, what technology, what actions can we take, who can we hire, what teams can we build to increase our growth rate, our efficiency rate? I'm guessing that you're going to say the bias should absolutely be towards growth. Sure, we can't ignore efficiency in the business. We have to allocate some resource to that. But really, our mindset should be, okay, cool. If we adopt this tool and that means we can double the amount of clients we can take on with our existing resources. That's a pretty big lever. We've doubled revenue. It was essentially maybe a slight increase in marginal software cost, and that's it.
Yeah. Again, 4 planks: tech and data, capability, governance, linking to value creation. Look, if you've got a strategy, I always say to teams, start there. You already did the hard work of figuring out where your growth priorities were. You look at each strategic priority and you say, how can AI enable, support, and accelerate this? Second priority, how can AI enable, support, and accelerate this? And you go through your strategic priorities, your value chain, and try to identify, I call them the needle up and the needle down. And actually, I'll tell you where my bias is: the power moves. Because you can put some AI opportunities into play that increase revenue and open new markets, and also do so more efficiently. Those are the best moves, right? So what I usually like companies to do is to parallel path 3 types. And again, this is where my personal bias is going to come in, is quick wins, midterm, and moonshots. You do need to, in my view, have some quick wins. If you just work on the midterm, bigger needle moving stuff, again, the supply chain and trade promotion agents, that's not a quick win. You're not going to do that overnight. You're going to lose some momentum and interest. However, if you only do quick wins, which frankly is where most companies are stuck, you're going to lose interest too. Now, the middle bucket I call conventional but takes effort. Because what we have to also be acknowledging about is we're doing something, it's midterm, it's going to create value, but everyone else in our industry knows about this opportunity too. And we need to set up and notice that. The third bucket is the moonshots. Where are we really going to change the game? And I like to have initiatives going in each of these 3 buckets: quick wins, conventional but takes effort, and my moonshots. Because I want to know I'm working on some big stuff, lower probability, but higher impact when it does. Some known gains, but not really innovative, and enough quick wins to keep some momentum along the way.
Wow. Very actionable sort of bucketization of priorities. I absolutely love it. Listen, an hour is absolutely flown by. This has been a fabulous conversation. I've learned an absolute ton. You're very eloquent, you're very clear thinking. You're a very good communicator. I get the teacher vibe from you, so I love that. I love the fact that you clearly have an educator's mindset of being able to communicate things effectively to large groups of people. I love that about you. If people want to learn more about all the things you're talking about, I'll drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and to your website in the show notes. But other than that, how do you like people to reach out to you and have these kind of discussions with you and maybe even get you in to do a review of their business?
I would love that. Thanks so much, Jason. So if you just go to RebeccaHomkes.com, which we can drop in the notes, there's a link to sign up to the newsletter. It's only once a month, but I do a big deep dive. I do a macro roundup, all the big macro news. I write a new blog. I do some other things there, and all the ways to get in contact with me is there. So the website gets the newsletter, gets you me, gets you more videos and podcasts to listen to.
Wow, what a cornucopia of knowledge. I love it. I've started to ask this question over the last few podcasts. If you could change one thing about business, because obviously you're focused on business. I would normally say about e-commerce, but you're focused heavily on business. What would, if you could just snap your fingers and change one thing about the way entrepreneurs do business or the way businesses operate today, what would it be?
The framing of uncertainty as risk, and we set our planning tools around it. Every corporate strategy deck has a risk register. Almost no corporate strategy deck has an opportunity register. Here's all the opportunities we did not pursue because we're pursuing the ones in the main deck. We have got to stop framing uncertainty as something to adjust to and a risk and bake it directly into our strategic planning processes, which means, Jason, I want to drop the word planning. If we call them strategic plans or e-commerce plan or whatever it is, it puts something in our brain, everything in this must get done. And we are living in a volatile, changing world, which is good news because that's a better time to learn. So I started calling them strategies, and I dropped the word strategic plan. And I would love others to embrace that because the word plan frames our brain, again, everything in this must get done. And that's not the bias I want you to take.
There's a reason why there's an O in SWOT analysis, and unfortunately, the O oftentimes gets overlooked, so I couldn't agree with you
No,
more.
Jason, I know we're out of time, but I say stop SWOTs too. SWOTs are terrible, right? SWOTs force you to bucket things as good or bad. That's bad for our brain, right? Because everything is a growth opportunity. Strategy deciding which of those should take. And on your strengths and weaknesses, it doesn't take into account differentiation. My strength doesn't matter if it's not a unique differentiated right to win. So SWOTs, unfortunately, balance scorecard are some of the tools we got to drop. They're not your friends in uncertainty.
I love that. I love challenging the mainstream thinking in
I get
any
in trouble
area.
for that at the university, so I'll say it here and hopefully it frees faith.
I love it. I love it, and I think my audience will too. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. Rebecca Homkes, what is your question for me today?
Oh, I was just going to ask you a more boring one, but I feel like I should have stepped it up a bit more.
Oh.
I'll still ask the first one I had in mind is one of the biggest biases I see in your world is the B2C versus B2B. People in B2B will say, oh, that person can't help me. They only know B2C. People in B2C will say, oh, that person can't help me. They only know B2B. What do you wish people would stop assuming about the other space? And what would you say is kind of the critical learnings that apply about both, or maybe the biggest differences that we should acknowledge?
Yeah, I love this question because I really dislike that bifurcation as well because for roughly the first half of my career, I was really heavily focused on B2C, D2C. For the last half of my career, I've been focused on B2B, and I think there is incredible cross-pollination opportunities here. And the reality is I oftentimes am helping the businesses that I work with, the manufacturers and distributors I work with, to set up their org design and work across that. And they're saying, we just can't find anybody out there that has digital chops and B2B chops. And I said, you know why? It's because you're looking for a freaking unicorn. And even if you could find a unicorn, you can't afford a unicorn. So why to hire a unicorn? And so I'm like, hey, why don't we either take someone who's really immersed in your business and it's probably already somebody even working in your business that has an interest in this digital side of the business. And maybe they're a younger staff member and they've wanted to break out of their current role, but there's been no opportunity to do so. And we can upskill them and we can do some knowledge transfer to get those digital capabilities into their hands. And we can put them through some training programs that get them where they need to be from the rest of the digital lens. Or how about we go to the market and we try to find someone who's really super strong with digital capabilities, but maybe they come from a B2C or a D2C background, preferably D2C, because usually in D2C, you have manufacturers and distributors selling to end consumers. So they still understand the logistics of manufacturing and distribution. And we bring them in and we culture them up. We immerse them in your world, your business world, your vertical, your business model, your sales model, your products, your categories. If we can do that, then it doesn't really matter what their background is. It's how hungry are they to learn? How hungry are they to perform? How hungry are they to prove to themselves and to you that they could do this thing? That's the more important thing. And so I think both sides can learn massively from each other, because in the B2C and D2C world, there's an over-reliance on customer acquisition. In the B2B world, there's an over-reliance on having monopolies. Right? I'm a master distributor. So if you want to buy this thing, you got to come to me. You can't go to anybody else. You can't go to the manufacturer. So historically has been a massive over-reliance on business relationships that last forever. And there's also been an over-reliance historically on deals done in smoky back rooms, ball games, and over a beer, right? The Forrester data shows that as of the end of 2024, 71% of B2B buyers in the United States today are millennials and Gen Z. They are not waiting for you to knock on their door. They are not waiting for it to be taken to a boozy lunch on a Friday. They are not waiting to be taken to a game on a Saturday. That's not what they're waiting for. They are doing supplier research online before you even know they're a potential customer. They are self-serving their research. And if you're not able to acquire customers digitally, you have a massive problem in this new world.
I could see that. Awesome. Thank you.
Listen, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been incredibly enlightening. I appreciate your time. Can't wait to speak to you again.
It was my pleasure.
If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.